Rest and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of KSAX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show, and hey, we're the She Squatchers. And I'm Jen Cruz, your host. I've got Jenna Grover.
Well, hello, everybody. I just want to put it out there. I am in a Christmas dress today. I'm going to stand up one time. I would have looked a little naked without the jacket, so I am a professional Christmas girl today.
There you go. There you go.
Yes.
And I'm all dressed for Christmas. I'm Santa's little helper today with my hat. Yay. Anyway.
Yay.
And we've got Tammy's not going to be with us again tonight. I was going to say she's making cookies still, but she's really not. Tomorrow's Yule, and she's got to get some more things, and her kids are home. Her adult kids are home, so she's just not going to be with us tonight. And I totally understand. She's celebrating Yule. So happy Yule, Merry Yule, however, Yuletide greetings. Whatever the proper way of saying that is, yay. But tonight we've got a super special guest joining us from last week. We had Adrian Lee. He's coming back. He's got more to share with us. So I'm so excited he agreed to come back and be with us tonight. I asked him, would he like to dress up for the Christmas spirit with us tonight? And he said yes. And he has arrived as Captain Jack Sparrow.
Captain.
And for those who are just listening right now, he looks ridiculously awesome.
Awesome.
That's very kind of you. I thought I'd embrace the Christmas spirit by bringing some Christmas privacy to the proceeding.
Yeah. So as Santa brings you presents over here, he's going to be pirating all those away. So just be forewarned.
Did I tell you what happened to my little helper? He didn't deliver any presents, so this is what happened.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him. This is what happens if you don't deliver presents. Just saying.
Oh,
I love it.
Oh, well, and as he holds up a skull, I'll show my reindeer skull. This is what happens when your nose doesn't glow. So,
And I don't have a skull, so I have a rock, and I just want to let you know it's really awesome.
there you go. There you go. Hello to everybody in the chat room. Hello. So we brought Adrian Lee back for tonight. He's the psychic, healer, author, paranormal investigator. He's also into UFOs. Can you tell us about that?
That is true. I'm a paranormal investigator and primarily ghosts are my thing. But about 10 years ago, I was invited to do a talk for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. And they're a big non-profit organization. I'm sure you're aware of them. If you ever have a UFO sighting or you go to the police, they'll put you in touch with MUFON, and they have field investigators. They're a bit like the X-Files. They'll turn up and interview you, and they'll take readings, trace elements. They'll find out what the weather was like, if there was an airplane going over, whether you were drunk or on drugs or mentally unstable. That's on their sheet that they fill in as well. So I was asked to do a talk. My background is in art history, but I don't get to talk about that at all. So my specialism, and I studied it to the highest level, was the early Italian Renaissance. And of course, in Southwest Minnesota, I'm dealing with that on an almost daily basis. But one of the things that was interesting is when I studied and when I was looking at all those early Italian Renaissance art, there was a lot of UFOs in the background. And it started to pose questions for me as to why those UFOs would be there. So I ended up giving a lot of talks for MUFON. I must be the only person in the history of MUFON 10 years ago that stood up in the middle of a meeting. I was giving a talk on UFOs in Renaissance art. And I put my hand up at the very beginning and said, I know nothing about UFOs, which is not normally a good start when you're about to talk in front of MUFON. And I delivered the talk. And over the last 10 years, I've worked closely with MUFON, and I've gained quite a lot of knowledge. But I ended up doing a talk for them at an open weekend they had. It was very well attended. And Ted Phillips was there. And Ted Phillips, sadly, is no longer with us. But he was on Project Blue Book back in the day. And we hung out quite a lot that weekend and got to know one another. And he was 100% convinced that paranormal activity has a connection with ufology. He was working on a case in Missouri where a UFO landed in a field. And from that point on, the whole place went nuts. There was ghosts everywhere. People in a factory that saw the UFO land in a field wouldn't go back to work for the following week because there were so many dead people wandering around. So we were chatting amongst ourselves, and I slowly realized how much paranormal activity in terms of ghosts is connected with UFOs. If you think about what a ufologist has in their equipment case, they have the same equipment I've got. So we're measuring the same things. So that was the starting point. I made a few notes on what UFOs and ghosts had in common. And about 8 years later, I had my biggest book, 85,000 words, all to do with quantum physics, and ghosts and UFOs is out there, and it's very popular. And I ended up writing extensively about ufology, but in terms of paranormal rather than, you know, vehicles that are solid and little green aliens running around.
Well, I love that. I love that. So can you give us a little sample of what's in there?
I can do. By the way, this is the first time I've ever given a talk on quantum physics and ufology dressed as a pirate. So I hope you embrace the idea that you are the first to have that. It might be the first time it's ever happened in the history of mankind, to be honest. I don't have any facts to back that up, but that could well be the case.
I'm embracing it. I'm embracing it right now. I got it.
Awesome. Okay, let me give you an example. A lot of people that I interviewed that were abductees or had actually seen UFOs, and I have seen some myself, of course, it was very interesting that a UFO, when they're reported, normally just suddenly appear. So you don't often see the journey. So people would say the UFO just appeared and it was here. And then it suddenly appeared over here. Then it went up here. And it's doing movement that almost defies physics, and it zigzags, and it's there, then it's there, then it's there. And the people that had been abducted said to me that when they were on board the UFO, they actually had the sense that when they saw the aliens, they were standing around a center console. There was no levers, there was no buttons. They almost got the idea of almost collective thought. So I was thinking to myself, and other people that have studied ufology and quantum physics would also embrace this, that if you're going to travel millions and millions of miles between galaxies, you can't use fossil fuel or combustion. You have to have another way of doing it. So if I said to you right now, imagine you're in the lobby of Walmart. You've just imagined the lobby of Walmart. You've not imagined the journey of how to get there, right? So if you suddenly appear, it's because you thought yourself there. If you now want to be over here, it's because you thought yourself over there. And they're zigzagging and they're not having the journey because they're thinking where they want to go and then they're there. Well, isn't that what a ghost does? A ghost thinks it wants to be somewhere, so it is, and it suddenly appears. Now, what's very interesting is that if you look at UFOs and their sightings and witness reports, normally something paranormal happens. You can feel a change in energy, there's a change in air pressure, something's going to happen, you just aren't there yet. Then it starts to appear. So it might be diaphanous or ethereal, it's not quite arrived. Then it arrives. If that's a UFO, at some point between arriving and being solid and hovering in the air, it's had to engage some sort of propulsion system to stop it falling out of the sky. But this is a period of notes that can be made. But that's what a ghost does as well. You feel something's about to happen. It suddenly starts to materialize. Then it arrives, and then you get physicality. So exactly the same way a UFO arrives in terms of eyewitness reports is exactly what you look at if a ghost arrives, and it has the same series of things happening to it. So I get the impression that perhaps aliens may have reverse engineered or looked at how ghosts move and how ghosts travel around and actually employed that to do what they need to do. So there's also things to do with the fact that a ghost walks through a wall but can throw things at you and slam doors and be physical. So the quantum physics involved in that is mass being physical, but also mass going through other mass. So a ghost is able to do that. But if the UFO takes you out of your bedroom with some sort of beam and takes you on board a UFO, your mass, and you've just gone through your ceiling and your roof line and on board a UFO. So there's so many things they have in common. It's almost bewildering. It's almost easier for me to talk about the things they don't have in common. So you wanted a flavor of things. Those would be some of the areas in which I cover and which I look at in the book and the lectures I give.
So, a quick question for you. Do you think aliens were in the very beginning, and this is just me being silly, but do you think humans were able to get enough of an ability, enough of a knowledge to create and then kind of evolve into an alien? Or do you just think they're completely a different species and they're not related to humans at all?
I suspect we all started in the same place. If you're thinking of a big explosion that creates the entire universe, we've all started from that explosion. And Gene Roddenberry, who wrote Star Trek, one of the criticisms of Star Trek was that they kept saying to him, all the aliens look like humans, you've just colored them green, or you put sort of prosthetics on their head, like a Klingon. And his response to that was, if we all started in the same place and evolution is very similar, and this is the best way of being, then you can expect aliens to have followed a similar path. But of course, there's things out there that we don't know about, and we're only working with the confines of our imagination. I do believe that aliens have probably contacted us since the dawn of time. There's paintings in the Renaissance. When you look at some cave paintings, there's very specific UFO drawings carved onto a wall 10,000 years ago with a piece of bone or a piece of chalk. That same UFO is visible in Renaissance paintings, medieval embroidery, has that same shape. And then we have photographs that are contemporary, taken with digital cameras, that are again the same shape. So it does ponder the question, how long have we been observed? But as a historian, the one thing that interests me is when they start to claim that UFOs have landed, they've crashed, we've reverse engineered them. It's incredible to think that the difference between the 13th and the 14th century is negligible. You would say hardly anything happened. There's photographs of Neil Armstrong shaking hands with Orville Wright. It's insane that the first manned flight was only 60 odd years before we were on the moon. And that's such a short period of time. What happened? How did that take place? It's unprecedented in the history of mankind to make those kind of leaps. So there's some interesting developments just in our own history where you could argue that things have been discovered and found that push our own technology forward.
That makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense. I can tell you that my
thinking. Sorry, just one thing. No. If you think you want to be somewhere, so you are, and we discussed this on our first episode we did with ghosts, thinking they want to be somewhere, you have to have an awareness of where you want to go. So if I said to you two ladies, let's go and haunt my parents' bedroom tonight in East London, we couldn't do that between us because you've never been there and you can't imagine yourself where somewhere you've never visited or never been. So that would suggest that if UFOs and aliens are accessing us, they must be able to see us or have an awareness of where we are to be able to think themselves there. So they are aware of us. Otherwise, they couldn't think themselves here.
That makes sense too. So do you think that's the recipe for interdimensional travel?
I think collective consciousness is what's required here. We can get onto being psychic in a minute, but in terms of quantum physics, Stephen Hawking, Professor Rudy Shields at Harvard have a strong belief that we have almost like a little beacon on our head. And when we think thoughts, they go out to the universe and they get collected in a hard drive. And I can discuss what that hard drive is and where it's accessible. So an alien, if you want to look at a higher being, miracles and prayers must exist. Otherwise, we'd have given up on religion 2,000 years ago. So we must be delivered on prayers and miracles. Otherwise, we'd have thrown all that out a long time ago. Now, if we pray and we put positive intention out there and we think what we want to think, and of course, prayer is collective thought. You're in a church or you're with a group of other people collectively thinking this. If that information is being stored in a higher place, someone can then access that information. So that's either a god or aliens or a higher being accessing the information we're putting out there and then delivering on that for us. So we're in a point in terms of contemporary quantum physics, where we can now actually prove that God exists through science and physics, which is a crazy world to be in.
That makes sense too. That makes sense too.
Being psychic may be that I'm not actually accessing your dead grandmother. I'm accessing the information that exists on your dead grandmother, which is still incredible and amazing, and delivering on that. So if you say to me, I want my grandmother to come through, she died 10 years ago, and you say to me, what was her favorite piece of clothing that she gave me, I may know that information because that event actually happened, and the information of that event is then stored, which I can then access, like a hard drive.
I just think it's so incredible when it happens, when you get this information. It is so exciting every time that it's right. I mean, it's just like, wow.
It's bewildering. We can talk about the show Unscripted Paranormal, but as a psychic, and I'm sure you ladies are understanding of this as well, I've been doing these kinds of things all my life, but with Unscripted Paranormal, for the first time, someone's actually there to film it and document it. So I can spend an hour giving you stories, but that's just my stories, my opinion, and my tales. If I actually show you the video footage of me being psychic, then there's documentary proof that that's taking place. And there was an episode that we did in an old church, and I had a piece of paper and I was writing down in the first 10 minutes all of the people I thought were in the church, and someone called Peter came through. And on my notepad, I wrote Peter, grandfather. And to cut a long story short, an hour later on the TV show, the guy that owned the church, his grandfather was called Peter, and he was trying to contact his grandson. And all the way through the equipment was shouting out Peter. So when I do paranormal investigations, I want this perfect triangle. I want me being psychic and getting all the information on a notepad and not divulging that, just keeping it to myself for the moment. I then want to run the equipment with my team and get recordings via the ghost box, via EVPs, via the video and audio recordings of those things being said that I can now collaborate and validate on my notepad and the things I've said. So the science and the technology is validating the psychic work and vice versa. And then as a historian, I then use that information, go away and find Peter. So you've got this perfect triangle of historical information that's fact, empirical scientific evidence, and me being psychic, and all three are validating one another. And at that point, if you don't believe that ghosts exists, you know, you're very stubborn, or you think I'm a con artist and I'm making it all up.
Well, I enjoy that very much. When did you first start to realize that you were psychic?
Men always evolve a lot later than women, which is why most women date older men, I guess. Because I suspect when you were being psychic and dating older men, I was still playing with Lego and G.I. Joes. So growing up, my parents are scientists. My dad worked in a physics department. And here's the joke. I hated science all of my life. My dad was a physicist. I wanted nothing to do with physics. He was at Queen Mary and Westfield College in East London. And I hated physics. I hated science. I did everything possible to not pass my exams. I was the creative one. I'm a constant disappointment to them. I play the guitar, sing, paint and draw, and I'm psychic. So they have no idea anything about my life. You two ladies know more about me than my parents do right now. So I'm a complete wonder to them. Isn't it very interesting that I thought this all my life? I started making notes about how UFOs and ghosts have things in common. And then 8 years later, I've written a book on quantum physics. Doesn't God work in mysterious ways?
Very much so. Did you send a copy to your father?
I did, yeah. He's probably going to come back and give me a whole list of things he disagrees with. But the great thing is it's all hypothesis. So it doesn't matter. Nothing can be proved until a UFO lands on the White House lawn and comes out and says, oh, yes, it's all to do with collective consciousness. But collective consciousness is all around us. How does your dog know that you're on your way home from work? They put videos out in people's houses where the dog suddenly knows that you're coming home and you're 10 minutes from being home, but you come home at random times. So how does the dog know that? How do twins know what the other twin's about to say or about to, present themselves? For example, there's animals like annelids, and they put them in mazes, they're worms, And if they go left, they get electrocuted. If they go right, they're safe. And they put a series of worms in a maze. And by the last worm, it gets to where it needs to go without being electrocuted, but can't pass the information on in any way, shape, or form. If I cut myself, all of the cells in my body replicate me and actually heal me, so I look like my skin and I'm the same color. Cells work together en masse, but I have no way of communicating with one another. So how does a cell repair? How does a cell create things but can't interact with any of the cells around it? It's a small, it's not even a neuron. It's so small, but they all act as a mass to mend things. So there must be a collective consciousness, because there's examples of cells acting all together for the same cause, but without any sense of communication.
That is really interesting. Thank you for giving me that visual in my mind. Oh my gosh, I was like seeing the cells. But no, it's really interesting. In fact, when you're talking about, how you're talking about the thought of being somewhere brings us to that place, I was thinking about manifestation and how that's so similar with manifestation. You have to be able to create something prior to creating it. You know what I mean? You have to
Right.
know, you have to figure it all out before you, and sometimes it just happens.
Well, the thing about a residual haunting, for example, let's have that famous example in Britain in the 1950s in York, where a gentleman was in a basement fixing a light bulb and a Roman army walked by from 2,000 years ago. He saw a residual haunting of a Roman army go by. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if the only reason he saw that Roman army go by is because there was a small girl 2,000 years ago who watched that Roman army go by? He can't see that residual haunting unless someone's observed it or seen it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to be accessed. Someone has to see and experience it, anything around us, to be accessed in terms of a collective consciousness. I don't want to go into too much detail in terms of the physics, but Stephen Hawking and Professor Rudy Shields would say that every galaxy has a black hole, and we have one. And if you have a black hole and it's sucking in matter, where it's not being sucked in and it still can't shoot out is the event horizon. Now, microwaves and infrared beams and light can't be sucked in and they can't go outwards, but they move incredibly fast. And infrared technology is what carries information. So we're using infrared technology now to talk to one another when we're in different parts of the country, but it moves very fast. If in event horizon, infrared beams can't move and they're trapped, that gives us a natural hard drive for things to be collected in. So there is some quantum physics that some of the top professors are pushing to do with black holes and their usefulness in the universe and how they collect information and data. That's a very simplified version, but that's what they would describe as being a hard drive that can then be accessed.
Very interesting. Oh, you're blowing my mind up.
The thing about quantum physics is it resolves everything. So everything that's ever happened, whether it be Bigfoot, ufology, everything that we've experienced between ourselves in terms of the paranormal can instantly be mocked up by quantum physics and collective consciousness. Everything can be described away using ghosts, Bigfoot, everything. It can be described with quantum physics. We have as paranormal investigators, and especially when we're searching for a Bigfoot, is all the unanswered questions about how it happens, why it happens, what do they eat, where do they go, how do we not find a carcass? Everything gets resolved very simply by just embracing quantum physics. It answers everything.
So when we talk about quantum physics and we talk about quantum entanglement, where one particle is existing in multiple places at the same time, how does that play in? Does it play in?
It does. There's a sense as well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's some particles and cells that only exist when you're looking at them. The moment you stop looking at them, they then don't exist anymore, which I find strange. It's almost like they require consciousness to make them appear. So it's crazy to me that a particle or a proton won't exist unless we look at it. The moment we look away, it doesn't exist anymore. But quantum physics in the last couple of years has proven that mass can go through mass. So the problem I have with a ghost throwing a cup at me and being physical and then seeing it walk through a wall can be resolved with quantum physics now, because they have found mass going invisible. Photons, which are light, can now be made solid as well. So if you see an orb and it goes through a wall, you see a ghost and it's light, and then it passes through. Light traditionally shouldn't pass through solid matter, which is why you turn a light on in one room and it's dark in the next. But they've done experiments now that prove that light can actually, photons can pass through matter as well, which means you can get lightsabers, by the way, if you're a fan of Star Wars. Solid light now enables us to have lightsabers. But, you know, if you read some contemporary quantum physics right now, it would blow your mind. There's things we've always considered to be the truth, like nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. And it's now been proven to not exist like that. Things can travel faster than the speed of light. So they're discovering things almost on a weekly basis. It's insane.
I love that. I love that they're constantly discovering new things that they didn't think were possible.
Going back to your first question, though, is if you're seeing atoms in one place and they're replicating in another, what you've then got is teleportation. And they have actually managed to teleport matter from one place to another via atoms. So we're on the verge of teleportation as well, on the basis of what you've described there and what we're discussing. And that might be another way in which alien technology can get to us quicker than using combustible fuels.
So I had seen, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I had seen something about the possibility of us being stuck. I don't even know where I saw this. The possibility that we are stuck at the edge of a event horizon of a black hole, and that we've been split into these different bodies having these experiences, but we're actually frozen in time at the event horizon.
Well,
have you ever?
I haven't heard that, but I know black holes are very impressive. It's the glue that holds everything together. Every universe, every galaxy has a black hole, and we have our own. But what's baffling scientists right now is that with the initial Big Bang, we're all moving apart. The universe was stretching and moving further apart. It's actually slowing down right now, and they can't quite work out why. But black holes are the glue that holds everything together and stops it all flying off in different directions. So they're very useful. I do remember seeing the film Black Hole that Disney put out to rival Star Wars back in the late 1970s. That when they went through the black hole, they were in a different dimension. But I'm not about to quote Disney films from the 1970s as being scientifically accurate.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. I don't think I saw that one. Now I want to see it. I wonder if it's on Disney Plus.
Jen,
I saw it
we
on
need
Disney
to watch
Plus.
it.
Yeah. It's got robots. It's Disney's version of Star Wars, and it's got Ernest Borgnine and quite some famous actors in it. Actually, Anthony Perkins is in that as well. There are some famous actors in that film.
Wow. And it was called Black Hole?
Yeah, the black hole. Yeah.
Gonna have to look for it. I hope it's on Disney Plus. I have Disney Plus.
I saw it on Disney Plus about 2 or 3 weeks ago, just to reminisce, because I saw that at the cinema with my dad in the late 70s, and I hadn't seen it since. So I went looking for it, and it is out there. It's worth a look. I mean, I wouldn't use it as a standard to judge all scientific data by, but there is a moment where they go through the black hole and they find themselves in a different dimension. So what you're discussing there has been used by Disney back in the 1970s.
I love it. I love it. Well, on that note, we should probably go to our commercial break and get that out of the way. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with Adrian Lee. All right, we should be on break.
I found it, and I'm going to watch it tonight.
I don't think I can.
It is a decent. I mean, it's okay. It's a 1970s sci-fi film by Disney.
I love 1970s sci-fi.
Yeah.
1965 all the way through. What?
Disney had a period where they made some quite dark films, and they created a new name, didn't they? They didn't go under the name of Disney, but was it Miramax, maybe? But they started making films that were a little darker. That film is quite dark. I wouldn't suggest it was for children.
Do you remember the Watcher in the Woods? That scared the living tar out of me. A girl went in and she disappeared going in a circle and ooh, yeah. Anyway, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's cool.
You'll have to remind me because I don't think I've seen that one either.
I've seen it.
There was some very dark.
I even have a CD or a DVD.
Do you remember like Logan's Run and Westworld? And there was some really dark, Soylent Green. I mean, there was some very dark sci-fi in the 70s.
Yeah, Westworld was really incredible, and what they did to it now, I like it.
Am I okay? I mean, I'm just blabbering away here about quantum physics. Is this okay?
Yeah,
gosh, yeah. That's why we had you back. You're fabulous.
That's
absolutely.
very kind. Yeah, when I get on a roll, there's no stopping.
Well,
I'm the
good.
same way, but I'm actually kind of tired tonight, so I'm like not all here. It's a long day.
You can talk about the energy. If you want to jump in now and discuss the energy that UFOs and ghosts share, that's quite an interesting topic of conversation.
Okay, that sounds good. We should be back soon.
I'm actually okay with being quiet this time. At least I'm trying. I'm trying, Jen.
I know. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hey, this is the Journey Radio Show, and we're the She Squatchers. Won't you check us out online at shesquatchers.com? And then we're on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at She Squatchers Official. So please come like and follow us there. Subscribe to our channel. Please, please, please. And click the bell for notifications too. And so we're back. We're with Adrian Lee, and we're talking about all kinds of really fun things tonight. Quantum physics, UFOs, what do they have in common with ghosts, energy, all that fun stuff. And while we were on the break, Adrian, you were talking about the energy between UFOs and ghosts.
Well, energy is measurable, so it's good news for us that if we're going to research UFOs and research ghosts, we have the tools to be able to measure energy. And of course, radiation, for example, would be energy. So Ted Phillips, when he was alive, specialized in trace evidence. And when people say they don't believe in UFOs, there's always that pesky trace evidence left behind of high radiation readings, burn marks in the soil, depressions, cattle mutilations, and the like. It's very interesting to me that the energy involved with ufology that can be measurable is the same energy that I can measure when a ghost appears. Now, what I will say is a very interesting thing happened to me about 5 or 6 years ago. I was investigating in a town called Redwood Falls, and there was an axe murder that took place in that town that killed 5 or 6 people. And it's one of the biggest axe murders in Minnesota history. A gentleman called William Kleeman, and it happened in between Morgan and Clements, just outside of Redwood Falls in about 1917, 1918. We were at a grave. We went to the graveyard, and his body is laid to rest in the cemetery in Redwood Falls. And I don't believe he actually committed the murder. There's lots of reasons for that. He hung himself after he chopped up his family with an axe, and he wrote the suicide note in the third person rather than the first person, as if someone had cut the bodies up and then hanged him and then tried to blame him for the axe murder. So I don't believe he did it. So I've got my team, the International Paranormal Society. It's 12 o'clock at night. We're in Redwood Falls Cemetery. We're at William Kleeman's grave. We've got every piece of equipment out. We've got static meters, K2, Mel meters, the ghost box, every type of equipment. We're recording ourselves using thermal imagery and infrared technology. And then for about 2 minutes, the equipment just goes nuts. I've never seen the equipment do it. The static meters going backwards and forwards. I've got EMF readings off the scale. The ghost box is making really odd noises. I've used that piece of equipment for 25 years, and it sounded like R2-D2. It was whistling and making beeping noises. The gentleman who was standing next to me, a guy called Brian, who's from Manchester in England, he's done a lot of work with the military, and he's worked in various places around the world as a journalist for the BBC. And he just looked up at the sky. And of course, it's nighttime, it's pitch black. And we saw 3 UFOs going over. It lasted for about 20 minutes. They were zigzagging in different directions. They were different colors. And we had all the equipment running. We had measurable data. We had the video camera of them moving around in the sky for 20 minutes above the cemetery. And we gave all this information to MUFON. And they said it was one of the most important UFO sightings in the history of America, because it was the first time they had measurable data of a UFO contact. Because normally with UFOs, you're researching them after the event. So someone's seen a UFO, you then go retrospectively to see what it's left behind and to interview the witness. With ghosts, I can go into a basement and say, "Are you there? Come and say hello," and it's in the moment. So this was one of the few occasions where there was some ufology, but we actually had measurable data and it was in the moment. But what this highlights as well is the fact that there is a difference for me personally between being a paranormal investigator with ghosts and being a ufologist. When I go down into a haunted basement and I say to the spirits, "Can you come and say hello? Can you come and find me? Can you come and say your name?" I have an idea of what's coming. I've seen dead bodies. I know what it is to be dead. I've seen people laid out in a wake. We have a history and a tradition of death. We know, that this is coming, and we have an idea of what we're asking for and what we're going to get. What I don't want to do is to stand into the middle of a cornfield, shine a laser light up into the air and say, "Can you come and get me? Can you come and say hello?" And I have big issue with that because I've no concept of what's coming. I've no idea what's going to come and find me. So there is a subtle difference between asking for ghosts and asking for UFOs. And during the course of my book, I did interview a lot of people that had been abducted or had contact with aliens. They're actually in their room and they'd actually taken them on board their UFOs. And it had ruined their life. They had PTSD. They were, their friends and family had shunned them. They couldn't get to sleep. They had night terrors. I mean, it really messed up their lives. So the sense that, be careful what you ask for, I guess, springs to mind. But there are some subtle differences between the two. But the energy that we recorded that night was very interesting because it's the same energy we'd record when paranormal activity is about to take place and we're about to have contact.
It was the same?
Yeah, the same readings. We're using the same equipment and the static meter was going off. The EMF readings were off the chart and the Mel meter was doing all sorts. It was clearly doing something to the radio waves because the ghost box was scanning very strange way. And you could feel the data coming in. It took us a couple of minutes to look up into the sky and see that it was above us. I was looking, thinking all the equipment's broken or something's going on here that I have no awareness of. So, we had a couple of minutes of wondering what was going on before one of us decided to look up into the sky.
Well, that is interesting.
The other thing that's interesting is I've got a laser grid pen. You may use them on your paranormal investigations where you press a button and it fills a large area with a laser grid. You must have seen these on the TV shows.
Yes.
So halfway through that experience of seeing those 3 UFOs dancing in the sky above us, I said, in my case, I have a laser grid pen. I could light up this cemetery that anything up in the sky is going to see this all lit up. Shall we identify ourselves? Shall we light up this cemetery so they can see we're here? And there were 6 of us that night, and we all agreed that that probably wasn't a good idea. And we'd be better off not being seen, to be honest. So again, that sense of fear of the unknown and perhaps, not necessarily wanting to have a UFO land or have that contact was in the back of our mind based on the things I just discussed.
Question for you. We were just in Fargo at an event at a Comic-Con, ValleyCon, and the person that was to our right, his name is Martin Geller, and I've been reading his book. Do you know Martin?
Yeah, I wrote the foreword to that book.
Oh, then you know what I'm talking about. So what are your thoughts on all of that as far as nobody else knows, but what are your thoughts on these alien abductions being an implant of memory versus the physical happening?
The interesting thing is, he's not the only person who's written about that type of abduction. It's quite a common thing to happen. But that sense of physicality, I'll give you one example. One of the people I interviewed for my book was There is a list of things that you can look at. So if you're not getting sleep, if you're getting strange markings on your body, bruises where you don't know they came from, there's a whole list of things that can identify that you're being taken in the night. But there was a gentleman that was so concerned that he was being taken every single night that he actually lashed himself to the bed. He actually got some rope and tied himself to the bed so he couldn't be taken. The problem with that is that when he woke up the morning after doing that, the knots on the ropes were different to the knots he'd actually tied himself with, and he was still taken. So there is a sense of physicality involved in that. You can't get around the fact that he was so obsessed with not being abducted that he tied himself to the bed and still got taken. And he would even drive his van around. So he made sure he wasn't in the same place every night. He'd go to motels, he'd sleep in the back of his van, you know, a couple of hours away, and he'd still be taken. So whether they implant things into you to track you down, like a dog has a microchip in it, if your dog goes missing, for example, but there's definitely physicality involved in that. These people were getting all kinds of strange markings. There was bruises. They were even retying the ropes on the bed because he didn't want to be abducted. I mean, you can't get much more physical than actually tying different knots to the ones that you tied yourself up with.
You know,
Then there's also the people that come out and say, oh, they just probably did it in their sleep. They woke up and they're just having night terrors, or, you know, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things out there you have to embrace. When you start kind of scraping the surface, it's incredible the rabbit hole you can go down. And of course, I started this conversation by saying originally, I wasn't a ufologist. I was a paranormal investigator with a background academically in history. It was only because I started making notes and I spoke to Ted Phillips and we started having conversations. Ted Phillips was on a farm in Missouri, and after the UFO landed there, he said he started seeing Bigfoot sightings in the area. So if you want to embrace the idea of a portal or the UFOs opening up certain things for other stuff to come through, that's a possibility as well, based on his research and the things that he was doing. It's very kind of far side, but I just imagine that if a Bigfoot arrives through a portal that a UFO has opened, somewhere in the universe, there's a cow chewing grass, looking around, wondering where it is. But that's just my sense of humor, I guess. But I could imagine that happening.
There you go. There you go.
Now all I can see is a cow.
You can see it, can't you, chewing and kind of looking around thinking, this wasn't the field I was in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that brings to mind like the old stories of people disappearing and showing back up like years later without memory of anything happening. Do you think that's connected to these types of things as well?
I can believe that to be true. There was a lot of incidents, especially back in the pioneer days. There was a play written and a very famous book written about the Civil War, where a gentleman went off to fight in the Civil War and came back 5 or 6 years later. And his wife knew it was a different guy, but the guy pretended to be her husband, and they just carried on living as husband and wife. And she tried to convince everyone in the town that it was the same guy that left for war. I think it was called Martin Gear. That was the play that was written on that back in the day. But I do believe, I've just remembered as well about the idea of energy. This is a very interesting story. In the late 60s, there was a geologist on the Canadian Minnesota border, and I know that's where you live, quite close to Canada up there. But he was looking for agates, and he was on his own in the woods, and a UFO had landed, and he threw a rock at it, and it just bounced off. It was a solid sort of aluminum-looking UFO, and he walked up to it. I'm not sure I'd have walked up to it on my own in the woods, but he thought this was a good idea. And he said he walked up to a vent. It looked like a grill, almost like a fender on a car, like a radiator grill. And as soon as he walked up to it and touched it, the UFO took off and it exhausted out of this grill. And he got such bad radiation burns. He's in the hospital, and there's pictures of this in my book, and you can find them online, where he's lying in his hospital bed with the radiation burn of the grill on his chest. So quite clearly something happened. If you want to talk about physicality of that, the guy's got a burn mark of a grill that came off of the exhaust of a UFO, burned into his chest, it caught his clothes on fire, and you can see the burn marks of the grill on the gentleman's chest. So there is physicality out there. It does exist.
I'm sorry, I have to ask, what was the formation of the marks? Was it just like you said, like a grill mark, like
Yeah, it was
literally?
like, if I described it, it would be sort of 25 squares by 15 squares, very small, about an inch by an inch, like you'd find a grill in
Okay.
Menards. You know, it had that look to it.
Very interesting. And they don't live by Canada.
We're close enough. We love you, Canada.
Love you, Canada. Oh, Canada. Actually, I was born 72 miles from the Canadian border, but I don't live that close to the border anymore. So
I used to play the trumpet, and I was asked once if I could play Canada Forever, and I said, no, I get bored after about an hour.
Oh, no, that's so bad.
True enough.
That's cute. That's cute.
oh my goodness. What a night. What a night.
I'm
Santa's-
planning
Oh,
to
I know
do
a
some
song called that.
Christmas
so-
piracy. Christmas piracy is on my agenda for this evening now.
I think so, because I hear, I asked Adrian, did he want to dress up for the holiday with us for the show? And he said yes. So here I show up as Santa's helper, and he's the porch pirate.
Yeah.
Well, you've
We're
got to go
Santa's
with what you've got
helpers.
in the house. I mean, this is my role play costume right now. It was that or a Ghostbuster.
Okay.
That's so fun. Are you gonna
Okay.
be? Are you gonna be Mr. Santa Pirate for Halloween next year? People will probably recognize you after seeing this.
I might need to grow
Kidding.
my beard. I need to grow my beard a little bit more. And Brian May needs his hair back at some point, so I might have to give him his hair back.
All right, fine.
Okay.
Expectations.
I will tell you a brief story. I was at the Renfest several years ago, and I have a full Jack Sparrow outfit. And can you imagine? I've got black eyes, as we've discussed on the last
Yeah,
show.
they
So I
are.
put makeup around my eyes. I dyed my beard black, and of course I've got the English accent. And people genuinely, the little children, genuinely believed that I was Jack Sparrow. So as I was walking around, I had little 5-year-olds talking to me and wanting to discuss the things they'd bought and how they want to be a pirate. And I was almost like Santa Claus. I actually pretended, of course, to be Jack Sparrow, and I didn't break the illusion. But it was crazy how many children would come up to me, genuinely believing I was Jack Sparrow, having a conversation with me, telling me how much they wanted to be a pirate. And I actually went to one of the Halloween stores, and you can get like a bag of plastic gold coins. I had a
Yes.
little leather purse, and I filled it up with those fake gold coins. And every child that came and talked to me, I gave them a gold coin and told them it was treasure.
That's so sweet, and it was treasure to them. That was
They
like the
probably
best
still
treasure, I
have it.
bet.
It was crazy. It was literally like being Santa Claus. I never expected for one moment to have a barrage of children coming up to me, genuinely believing me to be Jack Sparrow.
And I suppose you just ate it up and were like, "Yep."
Oh, of course. And their parents did thank me afterwards. After they finished talking, they said, "Oh, thank you so much." Oh, that's fine. It made me very happy.
That's sweet.
I love that. I love that. I love it. That sounds like so much fun.
It
We need
does.
a-
I
we
want to
need
dress
more
up.
outfits, Jenna.
I know. I was just thinking, oh, I want to be a princess. I would love to be a princess and sing to the kids.
She would do that. Don't sing now.
I know. I almost did. It almost came out.
We did an interview the other day, a journalist in person, and Jenna started, before we started recording anything, Jenna burst into song in her Disney princess voice. And he was just like, Disney princess?
He recognized it.
I know.
Well,
Wow.
at one point, we were on we were at someone's house spending the night, and she had a daughter, and I just broke out into this princess song, and she was looking at me with these eyes like, "You are a princess," and that was like the best, sweetest thing in the whole wide world to ever feel.
Yeah.
Until he gets
just
sued by
her.
Disney for singing their songs on your.
Oh, I made it all
your
up. It was
show.
all made
Oh.
up.
It was
like,
about
word for-
Bigfoot.
Yeah,
She
I was
made up
just like
a
throwing.
Disney princess like song, but it was all about Bigfoot in the
Oh, yeah.
moment. It was
And
awesome.
she loved it, so it just came out just right.
Yeah.
What's
So
interesting about dressing up, of course, is you have that theory of familiarity, or that Singapore theory, where if you dress up in period costume, you've got more opportunity of having the ghost come to you because you're recognizable and they recognize you as someone they would have been familiar with in their lifetime. So, I've been to Fort Snelling, for example, and a lot of the reenactors that are in the middle there in the parade ground, dressed in 1820s, 1830s military uniform, have said they get a lot of paranormal activity because the soldiers that have died at Fort Snelling, and I have a list of them, still think they're on parade there, still think they're doing a job. There's that sense that you get with the professional services like the army and the police, that they still feel they have a duty to be there, even after they've died. And they said it's amazing how much paranormal activity they attract by dressing up as a soldier from that era and that period. So again, I've done investigations in Victorian houses in southwest Minnesota where we've worn Victorian clothing. And it's interesting, you play the songs of the era. The Christie House in Long Prairie in the middle of Minnesota, which is one of the most haunted buildings I've ever been in anywhere in my life. They have an Edison Victrola, and we turn the handle and we played By the Light of the Silvery Moon by Ada Johnson. And I'm not going to sing it right now because you'll end up getting sued by the person who wrote the song. But the moment that needle hit that record, the house went nuts. I mean, the paranormal activity was incredible. There was things flying around. It was like an episode of Scooby-Doo. So we jest about the costumes we wear. We jest about the things we do in terms of familiarity for the spirits. But it does create paranormal activity. It does create contact due to those things.
Oh, I think it's fun to dress up for sure.
Well, I often wonder what reception I would get. Because when I go to Fort Snelling and do an investigation, Fort Snelling was built in 1823 to keep the Brits from coming down from Canada, where you live, and reclaiming the Americas. So it's very interesting that when I walk through the door, I'm the enemy. I'm the reason the fort was built. So there's been occasions on paranormal investigations in America where I've been treated pretty poorly and had swear words and things directed at me from spirit, because in their mind, I'm the enemy. This is the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812. And here I am with an English accent in places that were built to keep the Brits from retaking the Americas. So you have to put things into context sometimes and realize your history and the effect that you can have just by being present in a location.
I wanted to ask you a question. You were talking earlier about the things that UFOs and ghosts have in common. Have you made the same type of comparison with Bigfoot?
I think we mentioned on the last episode that I believe Bigfoot to be a ghost. I think it's a ghost of a Bigfoot creature. I mean, it could in theory be the ghost of our ancestors. That could be Neanderthal man. And we're just seeing the ghost of early humans could be the way to go there. Although I would suspect their energy would be pretty weak, but that might be the way to go. But the Native Americans touch upon this. They believe that Bigfoot is a spirit of the woods, and they believe that you should learn from it, and it should be something to educate yourself on rather than something to be scared of. But if you're thinking that Bigfoot is a ghost of some description, it suddenly removes all the problems I have with Bigfoot about the fact that no Bigfoot has been hit by a car. We don't find their carcasses in the woods. They can live in small habitats without food. They can live individually without the need to procreate and breed, because ghosts don't do any of those things. Ghosts don't get hit by cars. Ghosts don't require nutrition, for example. So I think the idea of Bigfoot being a spirit or a ghost answers all the issues and problems that I've previously discussed on why I struggle with the Bigfoot phenomena. And I've seen the Bigfoot evidence. I've been out in the woods in the Mississippi and all around the Minnesota River Valley, and I've seen the structures. I've seen the asterexes. I've seen the footprints. I've witnessed the howling. I've got all of that recorded. But I do think being a paranormal investigator and then seeing all the equipment we're using out there would again lend itself to it being paranormal rather than some sort of mammal like a giant monkey or a big gorilla, for example.
What about the little people?
Are we talking about elves and elementals and fairies now?
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I genuinely believe that. I've seen orbs in a basement floating around my legs up to my knees, and I'm wading through them. And I sat there thinking to myself, I wonder if the Victorians would mistake those for fairies. I believe there's paranormal activity. If you see lots of orbs in the woods or lots of orbs around your legs, it wouldn't be a big stretch, would it, to believe that they were all then fairies or misappropriated as fairies. I've actually been in the woods and seen orbs floating around, especially at Birch Cooley. There was a huge battle during the US Dakota War of 1862, and the Native Americans, the Dakota Sioux, came out of the woods and attacked the US Army. It was the biggest loss of life for the US Army during the Dakota War. And I've witnessed orbs floating around in the woods where the Native Americans come from. And it was on the anniversary of the battle on September the 2nd, September the 3rd of 1862. So I could easily imagine that if someone didn't know what they were, could look at them and think, wow, that could be a fairy, for example. You can see how the two could be mistaken.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Have you seen little people?
Yes.
You have?
Oh, yes.
Well, now I want to know. Now there's a story.
There are multiple stories about that. Jenna's seen them too.
Freaked me out. I'm still freaked out about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's amazing at the same time. It just means there's so much more out there that we don't know about. That's why we have to be out there. That's why we have to be looking at this.
Yeah.
I do think that man's wisdom and knowledge is far ahead of science. Science always plays catch up to man's wisdom and knowledge. You can look up at the stars at night, see 4 billion stars, and know that there's planets going around every single star, and think to yourself, there has to be life on other places. It has to, statistically, it has to be the case. There's too much of it out there. But of course, science didn't prove there was other planets until the Hubble telescope in 1992. But we knew before 1992 other planets existed. Science just couldn't prove it. So man's wisdom and knowledge always goes first. Science always comes last and brings up the rear.
That's true. That's very true. I
So
like
what
it
I'm
when
saying
science
is in the
catches
future,
up.
we're either going to be brilliant, and people are going to look back in 100 years' time and think, wow, those people were really on top of it and knew exactly what they were doing. They were the forerunners. Or they're going to look back and think, what a bunch of idiots. I can't believe they thought going into a basement with a broken radio and a flashlight was the way to go. So I guess history judges us, right?
Yeah, but we won't be around to be worried about it. Whoop, whoop.
We'll be there haunting it, Jenna.
Oh my gosh, yeah, let's haunt it together. We could be like,
We're gonna
hey.
We're going to be held as knowledge in microwaves, being held in stasis around an event of virus.
There you go.
No, that's not good, I don't think.
Less romantic, but probably more factually accurate.
Probably.
I don't want to be captured and held in a bottle.
You know, I'm just going to ride the wave. Not that anybody can capture me and put me in a bottle, because I don't want that either. But I'm just going to, see what happens in life.
You don't want to be a genie in a bottle?
No, but I'll have one if anybody has a genie in the bottle for me.
The paradox is that because we've had this interview and I've seen you tonight, that you can now haunt that location because I've seen you in your location. That's being held as knowledge that someone in the future can access. So you can now hold the space that you're sitting in right now because Jen and myself have seen you sitting there.
I'm so excited. It's a whole new world.
It is a whole new world. You know what happened last night? Just really quick. So I had just been singing an a cappella song off the top of my head from The Little Mermaid because my daughter watched it on repeat. And Jenna messaged me something about a whole new world. I'm like, also a song from The Little Mermaid? And I was just singing one and she didn't know.
Yes. I was so happy. I was like, oh, I want to sing it so bad right now. I'll just mute myself.
I'm trying. I'm holding back myself, but after the show, I will sing. Anyway,
I was thinking I was going to be a tribute act for Adam Ant, and I was about to burst in some Adam Ant songs. I was about to give you "Stand and Deliver."
Not now, because we're at the end of the show. But thank you.
Maybe there'll have to be a number 3. Yep.
Another time. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho.